So yeah, just kind of give us a brief overview. What is Lemnos Labs? What were you guys founded for, and what are you guys trying to do?
Sure, yeah. So Lemnos Labs is an incubator, and there's a lot of startup incubators right now. But kind of what makes us different is we focus on physical products. So everything in our portfolio is a good. So we've got an electric vehicle company, we've got an electric guitar company, all the way up to like industrial robotics. And kind of our core thesis is that it's never been easier than now to start a hardware company, but there's still a little bit more that can go wrong. And so we've tried to provide like the guidance and resources necessary to really help get the companies off the ground.
Very cool. So why did you guys decide, let's do hardware, let's build stuff, because I mean, it's like you said, so many incubators, so many businesses are all about digital. Let's build something that exists in bits and that, but you guys are actually building physical stuff.
I think there's two reasons. I mean, me and the other partner at Lemnos are both mechanical engineers, and I spent 5 years in the Air Force building lasers and missiles and infrared cameras, and so it's certainly a passion of ours. But I also think that there's value in being where other people aren't. I mean, it's not like physical products are going away. I mean, there's certainly this huge growth in the web, but people still buy and interact with physical goods every day. So, and I think that it is kind of an underserved market in that sense.
Very cool. Yeah. So do you think that there's more of a trend now? I mean, as it's like 3D printers are becoming available, tech shops. There's this community groundswell support for actually physically building products. Do you think that sort of helped start this new movement?
Definitely, the maker community, the tech shops, rapid prototyping. I think all of this, really starts to help out. And kind of what we do at Lemnos is that it's kind of it's a lot easier to make one of something than make one of something that you need to last for 2 years, or to make one of something that you're going to then produce by the millions. And so for us, it's about how do we take this great energy and this great capability in rapid prototyping and really kind of mesh that with the kind of systems engineering and skill sets you need to bring products to market that are successful.
Really cool. So you actually you were in the Air Force. You actually built physical stuff. At what point did you say, I want to start an incubator and I want to help other people build this stuff?
So definitely going to IT, a lot of my friends had gone off and started their own company, and so in the back of my mind, I kind of always wanted to go start my own thing as well. So when I separated from the Air Force, I actually moved to San Francisco and started a web company, and so worked on that for about 6 months, and got to the point where we realized that the business case just really wasn't there. So we ended up shutting that down and stopped and really looked around and said, we're not the best programmers, but we are decently talented mechanical engineers. But if we wanted to start a company about involving building something, just the ecosystem isn't there. And that's when we had this realization that there was this opportunity to enable a lot of startups that we think that aren't getting started just because there's not as much focus on the early stage.
So did you have the capital, or did you have to go out and convince people, hey, here's this incubator we want to start? Did you need investment for that, or is that something that you guys had the funds to start on your own?
So we can't really talk about fundraising right now, but all the companies that were in our last class did receive a $50,000 investment. So.
Okay, well that's cool. So what are you kind of like the lessons learned so far, in physical hardware startups versus say like a web startup?
Well, certainly it's that lead times matter. So like for instance, one of our companies is working on a consumer product, and so as they look to launch, it's okay. If you want, so for instance, one of the Lemnos mentors just recently launched the Pebble Watch on Kickstarter, and watching tens of thousands of sales in a couple days. For our companies, if some of our companies are looking to launch on Kickstarter, making sure that they've at least thought through, if you got 15,000 orders, what would you do? Because there certainly is that difficulty of like brand tarnishing. Of you get all these orders and you can't fill them for a year because you didn't think to start talking to the vendors before you launched on Kickstarter. So kind of trying to anticipate what the lead times are and what kind of like the critical path is really important.
Any prototyping issues that you guys have come up with, or is just sort of like that stuff gets worked out naturally as you build them?
I mean, there's always prototyping issues. I
Yeah.
mean, there's definitely a learning process. So, but one thing that I think that has been even more valuable than I thought it was is we'll often bring in like our mentors or just kind of people in our network to just talk to the companies, and just the feedback that they can give is really valuable, and in ways that would be kind of unexpected. For instance, I mean, if you have a problem or on your coding a website, you can go to Stack Overflow or some thread somewhere and find an answer. The reality is, if you're trying to like identify a better material or a material that you can be used in mass production, you really it's not quite on the internet. It's not just a simple Google search away. So the ability to interact with people who've been delivering products for 20 years can be critical. And even more importantly, the cross-pollination. So, we've got, like I said, industrial robotics and consumer electronics. Sometimes there'll be something from one field, and they'll say, "Oh, we do it this way all the time." That in consumer electronics, they may just have never thought of.
So as people are building these prototypes, do you kind of let them know, hey, you should go out and get feedback, or are they they kind of in the lab staying secret with what they're building, or how does that process work through?
We definitely push them out. Make them go out and do customer validation. I mean, people gravitate towards what they're best at, and so a lot of our entrepreneurs, they do want to build, because that's what they're really good at. But for us, you can build a great product, or you can build a great thing, but if you haven't actually verified that the market's there, if you haven't gotten feedback from potential users, I mean, you may build something that's like totally worthless or not viable. So making sure you're getting that feedback as early as possible from your users is important. I'm not, for most of these companies, I mean, they all have aspects that are patentable, but trying to be stealthy and stuff like that, I'm not sure is as useful.
So they really don't need to worry about, I'm going to share this with somebody and they're going to go and steal my idea and run off. It's really not as big a concern.
I mean, I think this is a concern with any companies, but it really does come down to execution, and I think that it's more important for them to get the feedback from the potential customers, like that there's huge value in that, and the risk that that potential customer just never would have thought of, building a better guitar. That's unlikely.
So it's really about the execution. Like, yeah, you can have this idea, but if unless you have the equipment to build it, the mentors to help you, the resources to do all that, unless you can actually execute on it, it's not not a threat. That's so. Kind of what are some of the things that you've noticed? As you were doing hardware startups, what are some of the trends that you've seen, kind of picking up? I mean, 3D printing's getting there. What are some of the things that you think in a year or two this is going to be really cool?
I mean, something that we've certainly realized in the course of this first class is just how far design tools have come. I mean, when I was a senior in college, if you had SolidWorks on a laptop, if you're designing anything more complicated than a ball, you were screwed, because it would just like clink over and you could never really render anything right. A $1,000 laptop can run even the most sophisticated CAD software. And also, you're really just starting to see this new set of kind of like startups that are kind of related to our community, where you can do cloud-based design, where you can do analysis in the cloud. And those are the kind of tools that make it even easier. And then when you combine that with 3D printed, with places like Tech Shop, you have this convergence that makes it incredibly easy, easier than it's ever been to start these types of companies.
Do you think people they've always wanted to do this and now they have the tools, or now that the tools are available, people are suddenly thinking in new directions? Like, oh, I didn't really think about that before, but that'd be really cool to build this product.
I mean, I think that there is this visceral element to building hardware, and I think that it is, for a lot of people, it is kind of always there in the back of their minds. I think it's certainly interesting that a lot of even web entrepreneurs, when they've made it big, have like a side company or build a yacht or something of that nature. I mean, there is something about interacting with the product in the physical world that is very tangible and unique.
Oh yeah, I totally agree, because my past, I was actually for a defense contractor. I have a mechanical engineering background as well, so yeah, there's nothing like actually turning a wrench and building something and seeing it right there, building a spacecraft. It's really cool. So it's kind of awesome to see that get more into the consumer side. And so yeah, so kind of where do you want to see Lemnos Labs go, in a couple of years from now? Like a bigger graduating class? Do you guys want to specialize in a particular category, like consumer electronics, or is there anything like that?
I mean, we certainly, we're pretty broad. I mean, so we like our broad focus. I think there's a lot of commonality in hardware, and so even if if it's aerospace down to consumer electronics, and we do a tailored design review process, and so you do give different feedback to those companies. But I'm not, as I said earlier, I think there is this massive benefit to having a diversity of companies and mentors, because that's sometimes where you get the biggest innovation, is cross-disciplinary types of stuff. In terms of where Lemnos goes long term, I mean, we're really focused on this class and our next class, and so we'll certainly grow the classes a little bit, but we're still very much filling out the value we add and making sure we don't want to grow too big and just lose the ability to help out the companies.
Very cool, because I noticed you have a ton of mentors on your website there. So how did you find them all? Was that like through your personal contacts, or you reached out based on some of the companies that were interested? What was it? So yeah.
Definitely both. I mean, we did a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I mean, I think one interesting thing about hardware is, if you're Jack Dorsey, you probably get 1,000 requests a day to be an advisor or a mentor. I mean, you can go and build and sell a $150 million company in hardware, and the reality is most people aren't beating a path down to your door. And so a lot of them are actually really passionate entrepreneurs who are passionate about having more hardware and helping out because, the history of Silicon Valley is hardware. I don't know if you've ever read or seen Steve Blank's The Secret History of Silicon Valley. There's this really cool history to the hardware development in the Bay Area, and I think that this certainly is kind of drifting back towards that direction.
Very cool. Yeah. So it's because one of the things that that I really love is actually I was going to say, do you think that people are going to start like this will bring manufacturing back into the U.S. or is it more like we'll rapid prototype a couple prototypes and then maybe outsource?
It's really unclear. I can't claim to be an expert in manufacturing.
Yeah, no, of course
I mean,
not.
I do know that the U.S. still manufactures an incredible array of products, and if you look at I think SpaceX is a great example. I mean, they're producing like some of the best rockets in the world, and they built a factory from the ground up in the middle of LA, and so
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of things that there's still tons of manufacturing capability and skill here, and so people get very caught up in all the iPhones are made in China. But then I think it really does kind of, neglect the fact that there is just so much awesome stuff that is made in the United States.
It's really not as dire because I live in Phoenix and we have a huge manufacturing base. I mean, we've got aerospace, golf clubs, water filters. I mean, there's all this stuff that's built in Phoenix you wouldn't think about, but I mean, it was a huge manufacturing base. Lots of stuff. I mean, that's when I was an engineer. This is where I worked was in Phoenix, and we really didn't have any problem getting anything made in the city. I mean, unless it was like a real specialty part, it might go to California, but otherwise there was plenty of machine shops.
Exactly, and so, yeah, there's still plenty of manufacturing, and so the different different areas will end up specializing in different stuff, and so certainly there's a lot of very great high quality equipment made in the United States.
So do you have any products that one day you'd kind of like to build? You're like, I've got this idea.
Like right now I'm kind of overwhelmed with our companies. So it's like, I mean, it's great to be to be around the entrepreneurs. And right now our applications are open for our next class. So I'm taking two phone calls a day right now, just talking to potential entrepreneurs, and so it's really interesting to hear their ideas and talk through with them, like, well, okay, well, what's your go-to-market strategy? Or, I'm worried about this. Convince me that this isn't actually a big of a technical risk or things like that. So Lemnos keeps me pretty busy.
So what's the application process for Lemnos? So, if I'm a hardware entrepreneur and I'm thinking, great, this is something that I want to do, what's the best way to get started, to approach you guys?
It's just send us an email. I mean, it's, my email is Jeremy at Lemnos Labs, and the email for the applications is just partners at Lemnos Labs. And, it's a little bit less formal. I mean, we look for, at the end of the day, the team's really important. We don't want to fund sole founders just because being in the trenches alone sucks. It's really hard and difficult to start a company by yourself. Also, we look at the core technology. We need to, we need to believe that it's possible and viable as a technology. And if there's, some technical risk, that's certainly part of what we do. And then, that there's a market application. And so, typically when we get an application, people outline, what they plan to do and kind of maybe some rough numbers and, a 4.5-month plan that, with about $50,000 spend rate. And then we iterate from there. And it really is about talking to the entrepreneurs and, really getting to understand where they're at and what they're capable of.
So they don't need to have any like physical hardware built. They need to have a pretty fleshed out idea. So they don't need to come to you and say, hey, I've got this really early stage widget and I need $50,000 in 4 months to make it a really cool widget that I can then sell.
Yeah, and so some of the entrepreneurs that approach us have working in kind of alphas or prototypes, and so that's certainly great. But we don't require it. I mean, you just need to have like an idea, like a solid kind of concept of what you plan to build.
So is there like a spark you're looking for, or is it something that you're like, that's awesome?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you have, at the end of the day, startups are hard. I mean, they're much harder than, kind of just like read the popular press. It sucks sometimes. And so if you don't have this burning desire to start a successful company and that you're truly passionate about it, it makes it very difficult to succeed. It's not for the faint of heart.
It's really tough, especially when you're building something. Are there any like role model hardware startups that you guys study or tell your class, hey, look at what these guys are doing. They're doing it really, really well. And, not that you have to emulate it, but just kind of consider or, look at what they're doing.
Oh, I mean, I think there's tons. I mean, you can look at consumer, products. I mean, you can look at the flip camera. Like they had phenomenal success. And if like you know much about the story, they had several other products before the Flip, and then the Flip kind of blew up. Also, one of our mentors is the founder of Siftio, and I think Siftio took like something that was developed at the MIT Media Lab and transitioned it out. But also I think that there has been some great successes that people for some reason just aren't necessarily aware of. There's a company in the South Bay that actually does surgery robots, and it's got a $10 billion market cap. It was technology that was spun out of SRI, so it's like really ultra high tech stuff. All the way down to something like iRobot. They have about $1 billion market cap as well, and I think that founding team had a great vision for robots that are single purpose that do really great things.
That's really cool. Yeah, I didn't realize that there was like surgical robots. That's pretty advanced.
And so that's certainly what it comes down to. Is part of our job is to be aware of what the state of the possible is, and what companies have had success.
So yeah, I mean, and I'm sure you've noticed just a huge increase in even the last year, probably a lot more hardware startups. Or has it been pretty consistent, and now people are just noticing?
No, it's certainly not been consistent. I mean, there is a bit of a hesitation. I mean, with Instagram, companies like Instagram going, from 0 to $1 billion exit in 18 months. From a lot of investors' perspective, there are certainly very appealing things about the web. So there certainly was an ebb away from hardware. I think you are seeing a growth in hardware startups being funded and started, and I think there's a variety of reasons for it. I mean, I think if you look at what Foundry Group's portfolio has a number of really interesting hardware companies, including things like Siftio and robotics. And I'm not sure if a decade ago there was quite as many people into things like that.
No, that's a really good point. So when it comes to building a hardware startup company, do you think should people have a background like in engineering or a background in producing physical things, or is that something that you can kind of learn as you go?
That's an interesting question. I mean, all of our entrepreneurs in this class did have backgrounds in engineering. Well, I guess one of them was a background in physics. I think it is important to have that, but I mean, I guess I don't want to say that like you absolutely have to have it, because I'm sure there's definitely companies where people aren't hardcore engineers, but certainly a robust understanding. And this is where co-founders become really important. If you have a great vision and your co-founder has more of the engineering skills, and I think those are great companies as well.
So really, at the end of the day, you're looking for a passionate team that has a really good technology that can turn into a viable consumer product. They don't necessarily have to fit a mold.
No, it doesn't have to be a consumer product. I mean, I think that there is a lot of actually incredible opportunity in either B2B or, you could imagine, if you have a better way to refine something or something like that. Like there's a lot of, physical innovation that can occur that can yield companies that, that maybe they sell a commodity product or something like that, where you don't actually have to, be selling to the consumer.